And we should be live. Hello, everybody out there.
Hola.
And Sheldon. I was editing a video, actually, on the Great Plains Rifle, part two of what I've been doing. And I thought it was 8 o'clock, and I looked down, and my wife came in and said, "It's 8:30." I said, "You're kidding me." Time flies when you're editing
We're having
videos.
fun.
We have Carbon Spider said howdy. Diane Houston said good evening, Garrett and Sheldon.
Hello.
Captain Ball Fanatics in. He said, "Good evening or greetings, my friend." Turkey Creek said, "This is going to be good." Oh yeah, this may be the most bipolar subject we've ever discussed. Oh, it's so weird. Okay, Joshua Harris is in. He said, "Good evening, everyone." Uncle Sasquatch Outdoors said, "Howdy, fellas." Howdy, Uncle Sasquatch.
Hello.
We're doing a subject that should be right up most of you guys' alley. Uh, we're going to start out by saying we're going to talk about plains rifles tonight. Now, this is a subject that I think both you and me, I think it's fair to say, we've dabbled in for most of our lives, but very rarely have we ever tried to dive into an actual deep study until recently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What have you found studying your end? Because your end is more trade rifles, Lehman's kind of stuff. What has jumped out at you about the study of your side?
um, I guess it would actually be. Um, it was on the tip of my tongue. Now it's gone. That more often out there is still full stock. Like the half stocks are like from what I've noticed a small percentage,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like a quarter,
Yep.
a third. Because every like when you look at majority of the planes rifles, at least the ones that weren't made in St. Louis, the Eastern factories, yeah, they produced half stocks, but a lot of them were full stocks.
Yeah. What I thought was going to be interesting when we took this on, and you started talking about trade rifles, Lehman's, Henry or JJ Henry's, your those kind of guns.
Yeah,
What I thought was that you were going to find was there's just nothing there.
that too.
There's just not a lot written on them. You got to
Not
really dig on that end.
not a lot written, but there's like enough surviving examples.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Grumpy Alaska said depends on back action planes rifles. Depends on how you define a planes rifle and time frame. We're going to get into that here in just a minute. So Sheldon's running into the issue of there's just not a lot. There's no major authors covering his side of it. The issue I'm running into is there's three major authors covering my side of it, which is the Hawkins stuff. One of them is really good, just passed away, Bob Woodville. The other two are good too, but they hate each other so bad they've spent decades just slapping each other around, writing whole books just to slap the other one around. That's the most bipolar study I've ever done, and I've been through the Colt history. I am a veteran of the 1862 Pocket Navy Wars. I have seen some stuff, but it is nothing like these people who are arguing about whether or not Flintlock Hawkins exists. One side is calling the other side a Cathlock Hawkin Colt, and the other one is calling the other side low IQ imbeciles. These are all like professors and college degrees, and it's just so bipolar the way it swings. But I thought you would have some real trouble finding information, but I guess you did find some. What are the books you're using for your side of things?
Using Charles, and it's gonna be really one sided because he's the only one I can find stuff for or who's written stuff. But Hansen, Charles Hansen Jr. He's like the only one I can really find because he has a little paper done on Lehman's, the Plains Rifle book. He mentions them in there, and one thing Garrett and I were talking about was the Plains Rifle book. From the way I was reading it, is Sam and Jake Hawking or God sent everyone copied them, and the Eastern companies copied them. Then when Garrett was reading his Charles Hanson's book, the Hawking is placed in history. What would you say was written like almost 20 years later?
79. 60 was the Plains rifle, and 79 was the, yeah, 19 years later.
So 19 years later, it sounds like sounds like he did a 180 on his feelings about it
Mm-hmm.
because and the planes rifle looked like I said, as I read it was never propping up the Hawkins for every little invention and stuff, but as Gary and I discussed, was the book was written in 1960 and talk about it now in 2026. There's a lot has changed since then, and a lot has been brought up, and so
Yeah. And we're not just going to talk Hawkins, but when you get into Plains rifles, you kind of have to talk Hawkins because that's
mhm.
what everybody's focus is. So this is how the study went. I mean, Ned Roberts, clear back in the 1930s, wrote a lot about the Hawkins, which I got to credit Vaquero Joel, if he's out here, for giving me a huge list of Hawken books to order, and I've been slowly getting them in. But Ned Roberts wrote about it. The same guy who invented the 257. He wrote about it in the 1930s, and he was around in the 1860s and 70s as a kid, learning to shoot when those things were still popular. And he gave them glowing reviews, like everybody did back then. So 1960 rolls around, and Hansen writes his book, The Plains Rifle, Charles E. Hansen Jr. And he gives it a glowing review because he likes what Ned Roberts has written about it. And then John Baird comes out and writes The Mountain Man's Choice in 1968. And he goes way to one side, saying all of Ashley's crew, everybody in Ashley's outfit had a Hawken. Every mountain man that could get one had a Hawken. Hawkens were in flintlocks and caps all over the mountains. Most popular gun out there. If you didn't have a Hawken, your gun was basically condemned if it didn't say J and S Hawken on it. But a lot of the book is good. But Hansen read that, and he was big at the time into Northwest trade guns. And so he waited another 10 years after hearing, and Baird's book went all over the country, brought the price of Hawkins through the roof. Then that's one of the reasons that Jeremiah Johnson talks about the Hawkins so much, is because that book was so popular at the time. Then you combine that with the 1-2 punch, that book, Jeremiah Johnson, and then Baird comes out and writes another book called 15 Years in the Hawk and Load. And it just skyrockets all over the country. It becomes the most popular rifle in American history overnight, probably for a while rivaling the Winchester as America's rifle. And Hansen is trying to talk about Northwest trade guns, and all anybody wants to talk about is Hawkins. And so he comes out and writes The Hawk and Its Place in History in 1979, where the whole book is basically just a slap to Baird. It's just the whole book is. He goes so far the other directions as to say there's no flintlock Hawkins ever made. There's no way they could have been made aside from possibly one for Ashley. There was no. They made like 7 a year, according to him in that book, for the Mountain Man period, which years later we found out it was probably more like 100 a year. But he went so far the other way that he just couldn't see Hawkins anywhere, and he hated Hawkins, and he bashed Hawkins. And it's like this big swinging pendulum because it stayed there for a long time until Gordon in 2007 wrote another book where he had found a lot of Hawkins and documented them. And then it starts to swing back. And then we have Bob Woodfill write a very balanced book in 2018, The Hawken and Its Evolution from 1822 to 1870. Very balanced, very good book. And I like somebody asked him a question in one of his lectures. They said, Baird says there were thousands of Hawkins in the mountains during the Mountain Man period. And they said, and of course Charles Hansen gets mad at Baird and says there's no Hawkins in the mountains, 0. And the guy asked Bob Woodfill, how many Hawkins were in the mountains? He said, somewhere between 0 and thousands. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, that's the study on this side. But you also have some books on trade rifles and a lot of different things that we need to get into. But I just had to bring that up because I have never seen people. So, and then we now have the Beck. What's his name? Now I can't think of it.
Jim
Beckworth Hawken, yeah. which I'm 100% convinced is a Hawken, and so are a lot of other people, which blows a hole in the Hansen theory of there not being another Hawken that's a flintlock after the Ashley Hawken. So,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just people that hate each other. I mean, it's vile the things these people do to each other in these two camps.
Hold on. Grumpy Alaska said Don Seth also has opinions. Is one of the largest collections.
Yeah,
I never heard of him.
yeah. I think he's written a lot of articles, and I've read quite a few of them in the
Oh, okay.
last little bit. But I don't think he has written a book.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I kind of run into issues like that. I need to find a lot more articles. Muzzle Blast has tons of articles by people like that.
Yeah, it's like what I'm running into with the Lehman stuff is there's an article written by Charles Hansen Jr. I think in the '60s.
Hmm.
I think it's available in Nebraska, or if you just type it in, it'll show up. And then the Ryan Gale book, it's right next to me, but Rifles of the American Indian. Then there's a second one that goes into a little bit more detail, but yeah, he also wrote. I don't have that one, but everything about Lehman's is kind of up in between Ryan Gill and Hansen. If someone has any other thing about Lehman's, I'll take it. But
All I've ever found is articles.
yeah, because Lehman, while he was a gun maker, he didn't get the props that Hawken got.
Okay, Grumpy Alaskan says, I think the issue is the time frame. What we consider a typical Hawken was not present at the fur trade rendezvous time. I
Yep.
would argue that's strongly not true. Because Fontenelle took a half stock Hawken to the fur trade to rendezvous in 1833. There's at least 7 that went in 1837-38 that were actual Hawken rifles for trade. And the rendezvous itself did not end until 1840. So they did exist. Now, how many people wanted to take caps? Caps probably weren't available to the mountaineers and the trappers themselves until 1836. But they definitely were showing up. Mariano Medina purchased his Hawken in 1833, and he was a mountain man in the southern Rockies, and he carried it all the way through to 1860 when he had it rebarreled. And it is basically a typical Hawken, with the exception of having a lot of embellishment of metal on it. But that is a J&S Hawken half stock, what we think of a Hawken today.
Like the one about the cap issue, I like. It was interesting. Was his name Nathan or Nathaniel Reith? Him and his little group, they converted some flintlocks to percussion cap. I don't know if it was supposed in December of 1832,
Yep.
33. So I think it's just like if you're a part of a bigger group and you have some are set up like a fort or even a containment, you'll probably have caps if they're available just as a secondary option, especially if they're center converting caps in the Idaho wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Grumpy Alaska, that is the question, isn't it? Were they typical? That's where we have to not go off the deep end like these two authors, who one of them goes off the deep end and says everybody has one, and one will go off the deep end the other direction and say none of them have them, and then they've just both ruined their credibility. And so I don't think they're typical, but yeah, Hofstock percussion Hawkins were there in the last at least 7 or 8 years of the fur trade. They probably weren't typical at all. They were very expensive. But Pegleg Smith had one in 38 and definitely 36. Mario Medina had a half stock in 33. Fontenelle had a half stock in 33. So, yeah, they were there. They weren't typical, I don't think. But you can't just completely erase them. As a matter of fact, Doyle Reed will tell you in the Rocky Mountain Fur Trade, they are the 5th most popular firearm. Most popular firearm there, not necessarily for the white trappers, is the Northwest Trade Gun by a huge majority. That's what everybody's bringing out and trading. Most of that's going Indians. The second is the American style J.J. Henry. The third is what they call the English style. The fourth, There's another one in there. I can't. Oh, the fourth is home brought. Pennsylvania Southern Mountain style rifles that are in heavier caliber. Anything these guys brought from home. Fifth most popular is the Hawkins in percussion cap, half stock usually, some full stock. And the last most popular is English sporting rifles. So that's where it's at as far as how many were there. But no, let's get back into. Let's go back into time here a little bit. Let's see. 45 caliber medic said, "Hello guys, these aren't my favorite rifles. I love the earlier flintlock rifles." We're going to talk about that. English German shorties, but I do like and respect them. Uncle Sasquatch said, 45 caliber medic, I feel the same as you. Not present is a strong statement. Yeah, I agree with you there. I would say they were not prevalent and not the idea of modern. No, yeah, that's 100% true. We just got to find that middle ground before we can talk about these things. He said, I would argue that the 1803 is a typical plains rifle, but what about, the name evades me, that carried a best? Let's go back, because we had this for the last couple days. Sheldon and I have been discussing this, and he sent me a whole list, so I'm going to let him define to me what we think a plains rifle is.
I have to bring it up.
And I'm gonna, because I too wanted to say the 1803, but I think we're going to nail it down to stability again.
Well, I mean, what did you say earlier, Garrett? That where's my phone? You were talking about the 1902. Oh, you said during Ashley's little war with the Rikara.
Yeah. A lot of 1803s went out there with the Army.
Yeah, but that was the Army.
I think you can say the 1803 is the ancestor or the father of the plains rifle. But then you had an argument that it goes back further than that, right?
The Jaegers being short.
Yep.
I mean, I'm kind of on the boat of if Hawken worked at Harper's Ferry and he saw the half stocks, he kind of carried that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are like, the like progenitor. Because you don't really see half stocks in the Revolutionary time. If someone out there can say, that'd be nice. I don't know anything about that.
I don't think there was any. Let's see if I can get this that I'm aware of.
But yeah, I agree with like Cool Hand and Crumpy Alaska.
Yep.
So what we defined as a typical plains rifle is it's heavy stocked, either maple or walnut. Weight between, now I'm gonna fix this a little bit, but between 8 to 15 pounds.
Sounds fair.
A heavy barrel between 15 sixteenths to an inch and a quarter, ranging from 32 to the 638 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Calibers 50 to 62, smaller. And I put down, and this was from the Hanson's book, and I said his book's a little dated. The smaller calibers are known to be made in this style, but aren't considered plains rifles because they weren't in a large caliber out west. They're meant for the local game trade or local hunters.
They call them squirrel rifles, but they are used for deer and everything else too.
Yeah.
But they're basically anything under 35 bore, which is basically 50 caliber.
Yeah. And they're full stock plains rifles in the style of Lancasters, but thicker or heavier.
Mm-hmm.
Iron or brass furniture, occasionally mix of both, and German silver later on when that became available. And I remember reading, maybe you can help me out here, but it was a frontiersman or mountain man down in Taos, or that had a rifle, a plains rifle that was indoor and in German silver, like the trigger guard.
Well, might have been Medina.
Yeah, maybe. And so that was what we defined was heavy stocked in maple or walnut, weight between 8 to 15 pounds, heavy barrels between 15 sixteenths to an inch and a quarter, and calibers ranging from 50 to 62, half stock or full stock, with the full stock plains rifles based off of the Lancaster pattern, and iron or brass furniture or a mix of both.
I agree with that. I agree with that. The main thing is it has to be designed for west of the Mississippi,
which I
which
put
means
heavier.
heavy, big, heavy. Uh, the 1803 Harper's Ferry comes so close. I would say it's hard for me to describe a gun that has a half octagon, half round barrel as a plains rifle. But it was designed, especially a lot of people will argue that it was not used by Lewis and Clark. I think since they found serial number 15 that has the double brazed underlug, just as was described by Lewis and Clark, and the non-flared thimble, I think it's a pretty strong argument now that it was a prototype 1803s that they took. That's a whole story for another day. But they have found serial number 15, which was exactly as described as going with Lewis and Clark. So, and those guns were bored out to bigger than 50 caliber, 53 caliber actually, even though we call them 54, because they did not know what they were going to run into. They thought there might be mammoths out there. So, they wanted a heavier duty gun with a military style lock. When you're talking about a big military musket sized lock that throws a lot of sparks and is really sure ignition. Heavy stocked, heavy barreled, heavy caliber. I honestly think we can lay down that as the father of the plains rifle. And what comes after in 1820, it's hard to nail down the first one, right? Because we know that the not Lehman's, but J.J. Henry. I call those plains rifles, even though they're going to the mountains.
Ones I would consider some of the first ones out there as plains rifles would be the Derringer rifles,
Mm-hmm.
and he was contracted by the wasn't the BIA, but was the Bureau of Indian Trade or something,
Mm-hmm.
and he was making his rifles for $12, and they were basically a heavier version of a Lancaster pattern rifle, as we discussed, was
Yeah.
a full stock plains rifle, and he was making those about 1910, 1911, or 1810, 1811.
Yeah. And I think we can rule out guns like the 1794 contract rifle because they're 49 caliber, 48 caliber, just a little too small. So, when you talk about the American Fur Company in the early 1830 or 23, 24, 25, whenever they get going, they're ordering guns, and it's funny because they actually order a bunch of standard, um, what they call American style rifles, which would be completely done up in brass, full stock flintlock rifles. They ordered a bunch of them with thicker wrists, thicker butt plates, and iron mountings. And they did that for like 4 years, 5 years before they went back to brass for that particular set. And their argument was the iron mountings on the patch box, the nose cap, the thimbles are more durable for mountain life, whereas brass gets bent. And it's interesting, I heard about one plainsman running out of, somehow lost the bars of lead in a river crossing. Wound up melting his brass patch box for ball. And I thought, well, that's kind of a cool thing. But you would have a hard time doing that with an iron rifle.
All right. I think it's one thing I was thinking about is I thought was interesting when it comes to plains rifles and they want the durability of you know they want the durability made into the rifle for being out west. But then a Northwest trade gun kind of outnumbers the plains rifles, and they were thinner.
Okay, so we had a question here, and
Okay.
I actually am bringing this up because I actually just read it this morning. Okay, the question was, what do you determine as the most common caliber? And I actually have the answer to this. All right, so
Can I
in
got something
in
out
the
there real quick?
Mountain Man era, 50 caliber was considered absolute bare minimum. Mariano Medina's rifle was a 50 caliber, and they teased him and called it the old lady's Hawken because it was all dressed up in this fancy, and it was just a 50 caliber. Uh, People like William Drummond Stewart, when he showed up, looked down on anybody carrying a 30 bore rifle. He was carrying a 69 caliber rifle at the time, cap lock. But he's like these. He called them pea shooters. So the trouble was they were good for deer. They were good for antelope. Somewhat good for elk, but Bob Woodfill in his book will explain to you they started failing on elk miserably with 50 caliber guns, and the fur companies started phasing 50 caliber guns out. So here's what we have here. Lancaster rifles, orders. These are gauges, and so I'm just going to skip the gauge and give you the calibers. In 1827, they ordered, this is the American Fur Company. 1847, they ordered 50, let's see here. They ordered 50 caliber. They ordered a bunch of 50 calibers in 27. In 1830, they went to, let's see. Okay, I'm not reading the board. Okay, they ordered 50 in 1827 at the beginning of the year, 50 and at the end of the year. Those were 40 to 45 gauge. So I'd have to look that up, what the difference is on that. In 1830, they started ordering 32 gauges. They ordered 24 at the first of the year, 30 at the quarter, 24 at the next quarter, and 30 at the next quarter. Then they ordered 2, and then 10, and then 20, and then 30. And then in 1832, they ordered them in 32 gauge, which is 55 bore or bigger. They ordered 90 and 60. Then 1833, they ordered them in 28 gauge. Now, I'd have to do the study on that, but I think that's closer to 60. That might be 58 caliber. They ordered 10, and then they were, from there on, for that whole year, they ordered them in 32 gauge, which is 54 caliber, 53 caliber, I believe. 1835, they ordered a bunch of J.J. Henrys, 50 of them in 35 gauge, so that's close to 50. It's a little bit bigger than 50. I think it's a 51. And that's interesting that they, in 35 and 36, they ordered a bunch of 50 caliber guns, but they only ordered for the whole year 100 guns, whereas in other years past, they're ordering hundreds of guns. Okay, they ordered 54 caliber, 32 gauge, 200 of them at the end of that year. In 1839, they ordered 54 caliber, 100. And at the end of 1840, 1841, and 1842, they ordered a bunch of 35 bore 50 caliber guns, but not very many. We're talking 100 for all 3 years because the rendezvous was no more. And it could go on and on and on here, but what you're going to find out is about 75% of the guns used during the mountain man trade are 53 to 54 caliber guns. 58 calibers are really popular after the rendezvous end. When they start hunting buffalo, 62, 66 calibers get really popular. And we know that Ashley made a buffalo record kill with a 69 caliber flintlock Hawken in 1823. So that's just, you're going to find that the 58s are 54 is most common, 58's about second most common, and then the 50s are way down there at the bottom, and then 45 caliber and below are almost unheard of in the mountain man period of the plains rifles. Yeah, 62. 62 is, Grumpy Alaskan. 62 is very much like that caliber. It's a very common caliber, actually. Garrett, okay, let's read a couple of these. Let's see. What's the rough district? Okay, you said 50 to 62. They were bored, most common to least. 50 caliber sounds a lot like earlier rifles. Doug Duke said, Garrett, you going to do a separate video on the books you and Sheldon studied for this discussion, or are you going to list the books here? I could. I'll probably do a second video, maybe a membership video or something like that, because I don't have all the books here yet that I want to, because I'm not done studying it at all. You got a list of books, Sheldon?
I will throw this out. This is really Garrett's video because he has more books than I do.
I only have 3 at the moment.
um, ones I would say is the Plains Rifle by Charles Hanson Jr. Some of it's a little outdated, but it's still good information. What's this one called again? Rifles of the American Indian. They're trade rifles, but they're in the style of the Plains rifles, and being thicker made and heavier and heavy calibers. The North, like I said, most of the books I ended up getting were always Hansen books because he's the only ones he seems to be writing about, like Lehman's and some of the trade rifles. That's why I like this Ryan Gale. He's nice because his books are more recent, the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't think of the name of the little paper from that. Once again, Charles Hanson Jr. wrote. But if you typed in Lehman rifle into Google, it'll come up from like the state of Nebraska something. Those are the only really books I've really got to read. There's like a general coffee table style book I have called Gunsmoke and Saddle Leather, and that kind of goes into the Plains rifles, but not too much.
Okay, so what I have on hand are Ned Roberts, the Caplock rifle, which is not in here right now, and then I have the 2 big ones, which is Bob Woodfill's Hawken rifle and its evolution. This is one of the hardest books to find now in the world. I mean, it's just, you better be looking on eBay every day for months if you really want it. The Hawken Rifle's Place in History by Hansen, which is still a really good book, even though most of it is bashing the other book I have in there, which is The Hawken Rifle, The Mountain Man's Choice by Baird. The 2 books I'm still waiting on are 15 Years in the Hawken Load by Baird and The Plains Rifle, which is a book you have by Hansen. So when I'm done, I should have 4 or 5 books, which I don't consider a library at all, but beggars can't be choosers in this economy. Oh, there is a set of books, what are they called, by Gordon, 2007, the Gun Makers of the Early West, but last I checked, they were between $300 and $400 a piece.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting one to have.
Now, one of the things Garrett was bringing up in his little research is the use of conicals out west.
A lot of them. Well, I would say they were more common in the East if you read Ned Roberts' book. He stated in that book, serious shooters quit using round balls in the early 1850s, which I found shocked me. I had no clue. But he was taking a 30 caliber rifle, and he deepened a Colt pocket model mold to throw a bullet that was 130 grains. And then he swaged it to fit in his rifle using cross patches. And his uncle, who was a Berdan sharpshooter and a champion match shooter in the 1860s and 70s, was making 900-yard shots with conicals in a 45 caliber gun. He was making 200-yard shots on snuff boxes with a 30 caliber and 130 grain conical. And I thought it was interesting. He said, in Vermont, we're worried about shooting 200 yards and hitting a snuff box. He said in Montana, they're worried about shooting 50 yards and putting a 60 caliber hole through a buffalo. But the more I read about it, especially on the Santa Fe Trail, I have at least 3 different spoken, and I actually took screenshots of them, 3 different accounts of men using Hawken rifles with 1-inch long sugarloaf bullets, all the way back in the 1840s. So I found that very interesting. So maybe conicals from the 1840s and 50s, even in these Plains rifles, are more common than we think. At least for some people who know what they're doing and they're ladder testing their guns, and they're, really good riflemen. I'm
Hmm.
not saying everybody, because if you don't know what you're doing, it's just gonna, you won't stabilize it. So a round ball is much easier to stabilize for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. We're always good to hear book
More books, the
recommendations.
better.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get on into this. So we've talked about the longer, what we determine to be a plains rifle. We talk about the two major rifles that are going to the mountains in the 1820s, and that being the Derringer and the J.J. Henry, either brass stocked or iron stocked. Vast majority of them being in 54 caliber and up. 50 caliber is really considered borderline unusable for the northern Rockies. On the Santa Fe Trail, it shows up a lot more down at Bent's Fort and places like that. But in the Rockies, in the northern Rockies, 50 caliber is considered borderline unusable. Okay, so 1830s roll around. 1825, I believe, is the first time we hear of caps in the United States on the East Coast.
Mm.
Percussion caps. I think they hit St. Louis around 1831, give or take. They don't become popular in the mountains the entire rendezvous period. I mean, they do. I mean, they show up. They even show up in rendezvous at the very end. I think the first man to buy caps was Fontenelle, who was one of the first purchasers of a flintlock or not or a half stop cap lock Hawken, and he bought the rifle with 500 caps. But he wasn't going to live in the mountains. He was just going to trade and then come right back. Uh, Tell us about your finding of the three flintlock rifles that got converted in the mountains and makeshift converted.
Like I know I mentioned it earlier, but what was his name? Nathaniel Reith.
Yeah, Wreath or Wythe. I've seen it
Wythe.
spelled both ways.
And his journal entry was December, like early December 1832 or 1833, when they were in Idaho or in that area. Anyway, it was in Idaho or that area. They they converted three flintlocks to percussion, and I'm paraphrasing, but what he said, percussion three guns due to poor powder, and that sparked a little talk between Garrett and I.
Yep. I had a debate on that. I was like, what in the world? Pour powder, so you got to have a cap. I think maybe if it was wet and raining, yeah, maybe the powder got wet in the pan. But wet powder doesn't ignite any faster with a cap than it does with a flint. If you don't get it wet with the cap lock system, yeah. Okay, what the author that you were reading added as a side note was that flintlock guns tend to only go off 7 out of 10 times. This guy, whoever was putting this side note in, is used to some Italian 1970s lock that is no good because a good lock will go off pretty consistently.
Now, my question is 1830s, and this is a talk for Jake because he's the YouTube black powder master. But what was the black powder in the 1830s? Probably worse quality than it would have been
Well,
later.
that was really when it was starting to hit its golden age, especially the
Mm.
British made stuff. But I talked to Jake about 1840s powder, and he gave me some rundowns of some stuff that basically was Swiss power and better.
Mm.
Because I was having some questions about some people talking about that, and Jake was like, at least in the 1840s when tests started really taking off, the powder was really good. That is military powder, though. There is a million different powder suppliers for these little civilian people,
Yeah.
and who knows what's good and what's bad.
Do you want to get into a good powder discussion? That actually has like a good couple chapter, like a whole good chapter just on powder flints caps.
You want to say what that is? I don't know if they can see the title.
The Encyclopedia of Trade Goods by the Museum of the Fur Trade. Gun accessories, hand weapons of the fur trade.
Mm. Yeah, and caps. Yeah, I was surprised to learn that a lot of the caps were still just number 10s and 11s like we.
Yeah, that was. Then they got even smaller than that, but I think because I remember reading that I think Colt had smaller caps for the pocket guns.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just trying to find out where that Wreath guy was mainly hanging out at. According to Google, Idaho, Oregon,
Yeah, he had a
British
trading
Columbia.
post. And I do believe, but he had some comments though. Like he said, mountain men as general talk about how they can shoot, but none of them can actually hunt. And they just snap their guns at every animal that comes by, and they never go off. Then I found out later he was trying to set up a percussion cap conversion service.
Hmm.
So maybe he had a little bit of interest in making this sound like that. But I'm sure he did. But he was also in, this was in 1836, I believe.
Oh, I found the
Go
segment
for it.
1834. Nathaniel J. Wreath. I'm saying Wreath. Um, deep in Oregon country, recorded on December 9th. A percussion 3 rifles are powder being so badly damaged as to render flintlocks useless. And then it goes to say a few days later, Wreath had contemptuously dismissed the trappers. Our hunters are far from good shots themselves and commonly misfired, and have miserable flint guns which snap continually, and afford an excuse for not killing.
Sounds
Yeah, I
like a fellow
remember.
that was just hungry.
I think
He
so.
was hangry.
He's angry. And I remember reading something that he might have been trying to start up like some kind of conversion business.
That's what I read too. Actually, Hanson talked about it
Oh, okay.
in the Hawken Rifleman's place in history. But Hanson was also of the opinion that he was trying to start a business, and so he kind of was spreading that around that flintlock guns wouldn't work in the mountains, which is ridiculous because if none of these flintlock guns ever worked, why would anybody ever have any?
All I can say is if someone wants to have a good experience of a flintlock in the Rockies, watch Clay Hayes' videos.
I
he
don't.
has it. He has his Kibblers. I think it's either Colonial or Southern Mountain Rifle. I think his is 50 caliber, and he uses it on elk, and he's like way up there in the mountains.
How does it go for him?
Actually, goes really well.
Was it
I
dry snaps?
think he only had like one
Yeah.
or none. I don't remember.
It's also something that has to be learned.
Yeah,
How to keep your pan dry. All that goes away with caps. I'll freely admit that.
yeah.
All that goes away. But it doesn't matter if your powder's already wet. It's not gonna like. I just put out a video 1 week ago on uh, that ladder test on the Lyman Great Plains, and I actually used a little too much water scrubbing the bore because it was giving me fits, and it took me 5 caps to get that thing to go off. Sent a bullet into the stratosphere. Okay, is there much on twist rate? Yes, there's a lot on twist rate on mine. I'm not sure on Sheldon's. So before we get there, though, let's
What happened?
we're talking about twist rate, but before we get there, let's talk about the half stock cap lock rifles. I think that the hook breech, patented breech, was first brought around by Hawkins. Some people will argue it was around or this or that. Maybe by a Tennessee gunsmith, or a Virginia gunsmith that Jake Hawkins worked with for a while. But they brought about what we know today as what a lot of people consider the Plains rifle, which is the big bore half stock cap gun with the what do you call it, the lug underneath, and for the ramrod all the way to the end. Shorter barrels, usually tapered barrels, amazingly, especially early on, from 1830 up until about 1849. The vast majority of them were tapered from 1 1/8 inch at the back down to about an inch at the bore, at the muzzle.
Okay.
But after they started getting a little more ordering their barrels from factories and stuff in the 1850s, especially when Sam Hawken took over, then you started seeing more and more straight barrels, and then once Gimmer took over, it was basically all straight barrels. But I think they started it because they hit it about 1830. They really start hitting it hard. excusing the early Ashley Hawken that they made, and what I believe they probably made a lot of Flint Hawkins that we don't know about between
Hmm.
1825 and 1830. The records really start showing up for these half stock and full stock, but mostly half stock cap lock Hawkins style guns about 1831. And they are followed in 1837 by your outfit because they're really some of the only people that are making cap guns for the West for that first, I would say, about 5 years.
Hmm. Um, just real quick, the one thing that can't put my head around is when they say, "Oh, there's no flintlock Hawkins," but the Hawkins were gunsmiths and making guns before a percussion cap was around.
Now, no, if you ask Hanson, they were busy fixing harnesses for 5 years.
I'm gonna have to get the Ouija board.
I was like, man, maybe they were busy, but they had 4 or 5 gunsmiths hired that whole time. I know they were repairing guns. It's kind of amazing when you look into it. The biggest gun business in St. Louis was repairing planes rifles, not making them.
I mean, a lot of it. I remember reading that one was like, especially later on, when the immigrants were coming through, they would have their guns or reboard or restock into bigger calibers,
Hmm.
and they mainly said the Hawkins were doing that.
I think that honestly, the story is they were doing a lot of trap repair for the American Fur Company. They were doing a lot of harness repair, gun repair, but they were making one-off fancy flint rifles for people like Ashley that we know about for sure. 69 caliber, the Super Hawken,
Hmm.
and then they were making them for people like Beckworth, who was coming through and just buying it by himself, just a trapper walking right in.
Hmm.
But they weren't marking them. They weren't marking them with anything like that. And so, therefore, anytime you find one, even if you know it's a Hawken rifle, it's going to be circumstantial in the eyes of the Museum of the Fur Trade because it's not marked.
Right.
And they're the only people who matter.
And it's really back, like as I told you, I would like to try to find different sources than the Hansons, but
Kind of tough, isn't it?
yep. And
So,
we've been getting questions about backlock action rifles, and yes, like I consider them plains rifles. They're just not as common. I would
they
like one.
start. They actually start showing up after the era of the plains rifle more. I've seen a lot more Lehmans in the 1870s and 80s with backlocks. The backlock saves you a lot of space, lightens the gun, puts all that action in the wrist.
I've seen some from the 1860s, but
There were a lot of pistols that had those actions.
I've seen some rifles.
Yeah. I wouldn't argue that they weren't existing for sure, but
Yeah.
I think that they really hit their stride. The back action, as far as the rifle, really hit its stride later on.
Hmm.
But still a plains rifle, though, in my mind.
Yeah. Um.
I think the one drawback to them in the early plains rifle era would be with all that in the wrist, it would have weakened the wrist, which was already the breaking point of literally every gun that went to the mountains.
Yeah. One thing I can say is I can't argue with the patented breach because I really haven't looked into that too much.
Yeah, I don't know yet either that much.
I just know it was
I think you're right though. We don't. You don't have to have a patented breech for it to be a plains rifle.
no. I think if it falls into the criteria that we listed, it would be a plains rifle. Just no matter where it was made, if it was made in Missouri or if it was made by a Eastern company, whether it be Tyrone, Lehman, Derringer. Even though Derringer, I think they fell out by the 1840s.
Well, William Drummond Stewart had Joseph Manton make him a gun for the plains in Britain,
See?
and it was a heavy, heavy stock 69 caliber rifle.
Hmm.
and I would consider that a plains rifle. So they
Yep.
can be made not even in the United States.
Yeah. I think I was reading his book. It's called. I keep forgetting it, but he was an Irishman and like Irish noble, and he was hunting around uh, North Dakota, Fort Union, basically Fort Union, North Dakota Montana border.
Hmm.
And he talks about having a rifle in 60 something caliber, and he talks about using it on an elk that he had to use a thicker patch and then ram, load his rifle to even get close to it. And made me wonder
Yeah.
if he, this is me getting, I know I'm getting off topic, but if he had like a short starter or something to get that going, because
Yeah.
you use a little
So
thicker patch, that becomes a pain in the butt to load.
something else I discovered in these readings: short starters were very common in the 1830s and 40s. I was always told they weren't. It's like everybody has a bullet starter.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So I don't think they were around in the 1700s, but in the 1800s and as far as the 1830s and 40s, they were very common by then. It's
Yeah.
because I think most of the production rifles were going more to factory industrial style guns, and they weren't hand coning every gun like or funneling as they called it at the time. But okay, so Hawkins in 1833. Let's go back a little bit because we're still trying to establish the earlier plains rifle, the early cap lock.
Yeah.
Jake Hawken arrives in, I believe, 1818 after working for Harper's Ferry, building the Harper's Ferry guns. He goes into partnership with a Virginia. I can't. It starts with an L. I can't remember how it's pronounced. A Virginia gunmaker who deal in Southern style guns with iron fittings. And Sam Hawken gets there in 1822, and they start two separate shops. But they work together in the winter of 1822, 1823 to build Ashley his Hawken, and it's a flintlock, has to be. There's no caps yet, and so then whenever Jake's partner dies in 1825, that's when they consolidate into their little 100 by 30 storefront building in St. Louis and start hand cranking out. I thought it was interesting. One man, when Sam Hawken died, said, I remember him 50 years ago. He died in the 1880s. He said, I remember him 50 years ago sitting in his window making a rifle for the American Fur Company at his bench. And that's when you start realizing the difference between the number of Hawkins that went and the numbers of other guns that went, because they were building a factory, big
Hmm.
industrial style factory. This was just two guys with five German gunsmiths working for them, cranking out about 100 guns a year max. So you start learning about that, and then they really started the half stock percussion cap plains rifle craze that didn't take off big during the Mountain Man era, but started taking off big in 1837 on your end. That's your cue, Sheldon.
Is it?
Hey, 1837, let's go. Then brass mounted things coming out of Lancaster.
Well, it was what Lehman or Henry Lehman. He was working for Tyron first. I think only for like a couple of years, and he headed down and started his company making rifles, and he submitted his rifles to the government. And, they liked them, and his rifles became the standard to beating out Tyron and Derringer, because Derringer was making his guns look too nice, too nice, and he was starting to charge more than what he originally wanted. And so that's like around the time you get into the more of the East, more of the commonplace trade guns come becoming the normal plains rifle.
Mhm.
As Gary and I would discuss, is like it would be like seeing a comparing a savage bolt gun to a Lehman, because they're cheap, but they're effective. You can get them everywhere. Versus a more more custom shop made rifle like There's that one. I don't know if it's still around, but there's that one place in the Black Hills they make custom rifles.
Yeah.
They, and so it'd be like that.
How much do you think a Lehman was running in those early years
Uh,
for a rifle?
I'm guessing between $10 and $13.
Well, yeah, because the J.J. Henrys were running $10.
Yeah.
Okay, so get this: a half stock Hawken percussion rifle, which people called it the finest rifle made. It was. It was very well made. $38 in 1833. Now that goes down to $25 by the late 1840s, but starting out $38. That is why the Mountain didn't have a Hawken rifle.
Now it's a thing of. I think I found a. I think I sent to you before, but it was a leaflet of prices of Lehman's guns in the late 1870s, and it was the half stocks were I think were even more for Lehman's too,
Mm-hmm.
and that's I remember hearing that the half stocks are more difficult to put together.
Mm-hmm. They are. They're more expensive, more metal parts, more fitting. Especially with the breech, the patented breech. Which did Lehman's ever use the patented breech?
Not everyone I've seen now they just use either a standard. They had a standard version of their breech plug, or they use a version, or they use a variant of that. Usually, I would say more of a Lancaster pattern.
Yeah.
Because
And if you
of the three I was looking at that at the Museum of the Fur Trade, they all had different breech plugs.
and what we're talking about, if you don't know out there, Hawken rifle is famous for having two barrel wedges. Pop the two barrel wedges out. You don't have to remove the tang screw. Just lift the barrel, and a hooked breech will swing around and allow the entire barrel to come out for ease of cleaning. Which is good because if you're in the mountains and you're constantly having to pull that tang screw that screws down into your triggers, you're going to be it's going to be tough on you if you're going to be out there that long. That's why people really like that. And obviously they didn't have it for most of the people. The mountaineers didn't have it, but they revered the patented breech, and everybody wanted it. As a matter of fact, I was listening to Doyle Reed talk about a uh, a British reporter who was in 1847 during the Mexican American War. We found out later he was basically spying on America for Britain. But he was traveling through the southern Rocky Mountains, and he fell in with a band of 7 like holdover mountain men who were still trapping beaver after rendezvous. And he asked them what is the best gun for the mountain, and they agreed to a manned Hawkins rifle. And by the way, everybody back then spelled it with an I instead of an E. It's kind of weird to look at. And he looked around and noticed that they all had flintlock, even in 1847, full stock brass mounted rifles. And he said, "Are any of these Hawkins?" And they looked at him and said, "No, none of us have ever been able to afford a Hawkins, but it's the best rifle." But yeah, Lehman's become like it does not take long after 1837 for the Lehman rifle to just
Dominant.
explode. Well, you still have your little 5 to 7 man shop working in St. Louis, 100 rifles at a time. What do you think Lehman's rifle output was in 1840?
I have actually never seen exact numbers for it, but they were able to fill out their status quo from the government pretty quickly. And then whatever rifles didn't meet their standards, they were able to resell under Conestoga Works. So if you see a rifle that says Conestoga, it's from Lehman. And then
Mm-hmm.
Lehman was able to basically they outsourced a lot of their stuff. Like when you read into Lehman's, you say in the 1840s they had this patch box and this lock. They were full stock or half stock, and then or flintlock or percussion cap, and but then you'll find a gun that was made in the 1840s or 1850s that would just be a mix of everything. And it came from what I read is that when they were making a flintlock, when they were making a Lehman, if they were doing it like Colt was, you would kind of passing it down assembly line style.
Mm-hmm. Big
What
factory.
whatever that person grabbed out the box at is what you got.
Yep.
If they were made to be in a certain style, yeah, but as because there's like an oval patch box Lehman style, an oval cap box for Lehman's. There's a little circle one. There's like a whole like Pennsylvania style long American long rifle style patch box. That actually got phased out, from my understanding, a little earlier
Yep.
to being just a simple cap boxes. Um, in like all regards, if they had, I should have wrote this all down. But they were able to fill out their orders for a government really quick, and that's just their orders
Hmm.
for a government. So if the government wanted, 300 guns, they'd get it done within 6 months. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
I should have had all those written down, but that also doesn't include their output of civilian made guns your brother Ethan has or had,
Yeah.
and other made Lehman guns that were being made and sold on the civilian market that weren't trade
Yeah.
guns or plains guns.
We did a teardown of a what we call a hardware store Lehman, which wasn't a trade gun. It was a small caliber squirrel rifle. But when we were doing that teardown, I was doing some research, and we're talking between 1837 and 1888, give or take, hundreds of thousands of rifles, like a bunch, and at least 100,000. I got to do the research on it again. But you're talking about when compared to someone like these high-end Hawken rifles, 5,000 guns over, roughly 5,000 guns over a period of 50 years, from 25 to 60, basically. Like I said, it wouldn't be 50 years, that'd be 30. I keep adding the Gimmer years. But
And it's
just,
like with
yeah.
Lehman, he continued making them from basically 1837 to 1887 when they stopped,
Hmm.
when they closed their doors.
And what I found interesting about Lehman was when the cartridge guns take off in 1870-ish, 73, we start to get all these. You'd think he'd disappear, but he had his biggest business from 73 to 85, I think.
Yeah.
Like, that was cranking for them. So I was impressed with that. And when you read stories like, say, Little House on the Prairie, which is a story that takes place in mid-1870s, everybody involved in the story is still using a muzzle-loading rifle.
Hmm.
And I think that is fair for most people of the time.
It's like when you go Fort Robinson, they have Little Bat Garnier's plains rifle. It's a full stocks rifle and it's in 62 caliber.
Do you remember who made it?
Folsom, at least that's what's on the stamped on the
Oh,
barrel.
California makers.
Yeah.
Now, there were the Dimmicks, too, which Turkey Creek just showed me a barrel of one of those, but those are what people think of now when they think of a Hawken, because that's what they use to style the Thompson Center after. And they didn't
And
make very many.
now this was actually, goes back to what Garrett and I were talking about when we were discussing this. Was back then a Hawken was a Hawken, you know, some legendary gun. Only a mountain man carried, kind of like a Bowie knife. Everyone needed a Bowie knife.
Hmm.
And a plains rifle was a plains rifle, or just considered a gun, a plain gun,
Hmm.
or just a rifle. Nowadays, because of Thompson Center, CVA, the Italians, a
It's all
Hawken,
Hawkins.
it's all Hawkins.
It's all a Hawken, man. Everything's a Hawken. Okay. Also, yeah, that was a Grumpy. That was a good book that you suggested to us. Let's go through a few of these comments. Much info on twist rates. I'm sorry, we got back to that. Or 1 in 48. My pedestal is 1 in 65. Better for round balls. I'm gonna let Sheldon go first because I found some interesting things on Hawken twist rates. What do you think twist rates commonly were in Lehman's? Which the reason we're using Hawken and Lehman's, although there's hundreds of other makers, these are the big two. One of them's got a big name. One of them's got big production.
um, from the little I've seen, the only ones really posting the rate and the twist rates are the guys who own the new, who still own some.
Mm-hmm.
About 1 in 60 something, 1 in 60 to 1 in 62 5.
Yes.
So what'd you say that'll be like an average
Yep. Round
twist
ball
weight?
twist.
Yeah.
Hawkins blew my socks off when I found out that they were standard in 1 in 48. I thought that was a modern thing. I'd like the Thompson Centers, but I think they built them to stabilize conicals, and I would love to see the proof of that. But I think conicals were so much more common than people are giving them credit for that I think that the barrels are actually made to stabilize conicals with a 1 in 48 faster twist. Why else would you do that? And like I said, there's some offshoot ones, especially that Jake made earlier, that are marked J Hawken or Jake Hawken, that they're slower twist. But by the time you get into the 1840s, when they really hit their stride with the gold rush, 1 in 48 became a standard Hawken twist. And that just blew my mind. I was like, wow. Because you never hear that. We always hear 1 in 48's a modern gun, but that's how they twisted them.
In the plains rifle, Hansen does have a snippet from an article. I think it was written like 1890 or 1895, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And the author of that article talks about how he found a basically brand new Hawken just kind of laying in the corner of a gun store.
Mm-hmm.
And he tries it out, and he finds remarkable accuracy. I think he used a round ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hansen also in his book goes on to the thing of Hawken has its accuracy because of the slow twist rate and soft iron used for a barrel.
Well, it wasn't very slow. He might have been wrong there, but the standard twist rate was considered fast for the time. So, but that's Hansen's earlier book, and he will admit in his later book there's a lot of mistakes in that earlier book.
That's why it's really hard to go off of that book as a definite because of Hansen, reiterating himself 19 years down the road, and what else has been found.
19 years later, he's chewing himself out for being a Hawken before that. It's kind of funny.
And, in the last 65, 66 years, what has been found.
Yep. Okay, Doug Duke says store listing in San Felipe, Texas show caps in stock in 1836. That seems to be common when they start getting down, around to everywhere, including the mountains in 1836. Texas Rangers also ordered caps in 35. Let's see. Grumpy Alaska said, I've also heard that the Northwest Company near the end was having trouble sourcing good flintlocks. Is possible late flinters? Yeah, I don't know. It's possible, but I think the people that held on to them still really liked them.
One thing, who said that again? Was that Grumpy Alaska? Yeah, it was like Hudson Bay, they were sending out orders for flintlocks, and they're getting orders back from their makers in England saying, yeah, we're having a hard time sourcing the good flintlocks. Can you please just order something else? But Hudson Bay was, able to keep flintlocks on the table until...
Yeah, but we're talking 1870s when they start running into that issue.
So, yeah, 1860s, 70s is when they start running into that issue, so...
Yeah, the flintlock held on until... I agree with Woodfill on one thing that a lot of people don't consider. The flintlock for the average person was still, in the West, was still the primary weapon until the Civil War. I mean, a lot of people that were fighting and living by their guns were moving to cap locks, obviously. But the average person was still hanging on to flintlocks up to the Civil War.
I mean, like some of the books I found that were written in the 1890s in Canada, and all the natives and a lot of the natives and the ones who relied on Hudson Bay, they were still using flintlocks.
Yeah, Joshua Harris said, aren't back-action rifles considered more of a European design? Originally seen a lot of English sporters. And yeah, it's true, but you have to remember a lot of the locks of this time period, even the regular flintlocks, were imported from England. I mean, Hawken wasn't building flintlocks, so neither was Lehman or anybody else, or a lot of times even percussion locks. A lot of times that stuff is imported from Europe. It's an interesting story on the Southern mountain rifles.
They were the true mountain man gun.
No, but the double set triggers that started coming out in 1810, 1815 was because the locks that these gunsmiths were getting from Britain, they were shipped over in barrels. They were always rusted. They had really heavy springs. The triggers were terrible. What I've read is the double set trigger was designed to make up for the poor trigger pull on those British imported locks. Okay. Yeah, Grumpy Alaska said back actions became almost the go-to for double barrel shotguns. Okay, I'm gonna skip through some of these. Gimmer carried on the Hawkinization of early breech loaders. Yes, he did. Okay, there's Turkey Creek. He says Turkey Creek said the successor to Dakota Arms and Sturgis is Park West Arms. Our son is a gunsmith there. That's who you're talking about, I think.
Hmm.
When you were talking about the Black Hills gunsmith. Wasn't Kimber a Mountain West maker at one time before they went big?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Yeah, son. Uh, okay, you got that. Doug Duke said Lehman needs its own book. Just a little in it just is a little in everyone else's book. That's exactly true. And it's going to be hard to find the information because I doubt that much was kept outside of
Doubt,
government.
I doubt much was kept, and if the Pennsylvania Historic Society has anything, it's probably buried.
You know what's sad? The only person who could write a legitimate book on it, you know who it was?
Hmm.
Charles Hanson.
Yeah, he's the only one who has really anything.
he's got the access to about everything. Conicals were widely used by militaries by 1860. Yes, they were. But I'm just surprised of all the people I'm hearing about, even in the mountains, who are casting Sugarloaf style bullets for their rifles. In 1830s and 40s, 1896 Shepard said, "Can you imagine buying an expensive Hawken and it won't fit in your single cab buckboard?" Interesting. Mariano Medina, when he settled over by Estes Park, between Estes Park and Loveland, in 1860, took his gun back to Sam Hawken that was still a 50 caliber all this time, and everybody laughed at it and called it the old lady's Hawken. Took it to Sam Hawken, who was in Denver at the time, and commissioned him to put a new lock and a 58 caliber barrel on it for hunting buffalo, and put a metal strip along the bottom of it because he carried it in a buckboard for about 15 years after he quit being a mountain man, and the buckboard rubbed the bottom of the stock off to where you could see the ramrod through the bottom of the stock. So the way that Sam Hawken fixed that was just to nail a piece of metal across the bottom of the whole thing. Which
I've seen a few of those.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. But yeah, he upgraded it to 58 caliber so he could hunt buffalo with it in 1860. Let's see. Grumpy Alaska said Flint held on in the Alaska Northwest until the early 1900s. Didn't double set triggers exist on 1700 Jaeger's designs? I don't know if they did or not. I just read this in I can't remember what book it was at this point, but it was the design of the Southern Mountain style double set trigger was because of English locks in the 1800s. I'm not saying there weren't especially safety style triggers before that, but that's what the design of those was for. That's some cool history about the buckboard and the metal strip. Didn't know that. Yeah, you got to get Woodfield's book if you'll ever find it again. We're all going to have to get a hold of Ethan from I Love Muzzle Loading and tell the NMLRA to run another print, please.
Right.
Bridger was awarded a 45 caliber rifle in his later years. Yeah, and that was a backlock. And that was well after his even buffalo hunting time. Bridger's last Hawken he sold in 1866 when they were starting Fort Phil Kearny. He was one of his last scouting expeditions. He bought a Gimmer Hawken. He had it the entire time he was up there in the north, and then he sold it when he went home and never bought another Hawken. After that, he had a 45 caliber backlock. So, where are we at?
I lost track a long time ago.
We were in 1837 last I checked, moving into the 1840s when the Lehman became the number one rifle in the United States for the next like 60 years. So, 40, 50, 60, 70, I'd say the next 35 years.
I would say it was the best rifle until military surplus wiped it out.
I wouldn't say it's the best. Them Hawkins are still out there. But it's the most prominent.
Yeah, but it's best in numbers.
It's the biggest in numbers, yes. Hundreds of thousands.
But it makes me curious because, this is going a little off. The 1841 Mississippi rifle was popular with overlanders and whatnot
Hmm.
because of the big heavy bore. So
And popular with people like the Texas Rangers, who I was reading in Duck Duke's their book, and he was talking early on about hundreds of plains rifles makers across Texas. Just little shops doing 1, 2, 10, you know. And it's kind of understated how many different makers there were of plains rifles.
well, one thing again, like I said, I can really only go off the plains rifle book because that's only the real one I have, and yeah, it's really outdated. But it does have lists of makers just around St. Louis and during the time Hawken was around. There's a lot.
Yeah, I'm probably what 20 or 30 or something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were actually doing just keep them busy with repair work because the mountains are so hard, even on these big rifles.
Like I sent the picture to you, but in that encyclopedia book, it does have a picture of a generic gun stock that you're able to buy and just repair a rifle.
Hmm.
I thought that was really cool because I don't know why I just never thought about that being a thing, even though it's a thing nowadays.
Yeah. I think we need to move out of the mountains though now and start talking about the trails
The
because
Santa Fe Trail,
the two
Hawkins
places,
bread and butter.
yeah, the two places that, or three places that you can buy these plains rifles, be it Lehman, be it Hawken, be it Dimick, be it you can buy them in St. Louis when you get onto the trail or Independence if you're going north. You can buy them at Bent's Fort, especially Lehman's, but they also boasted the most amount of Hawkins sold if you're going on the Santa Fe Trail. If you're on the California or the Oregon Trail, you can buy them at Fort Laramie.
Hmm.
And those are the big ones. It's kind of that area when you get to the mountains, that's when people tend to buy them. Because I think on the plains, for some reason, most people still have their small rifles. But I did notice that on average, Bent's Fort sold about 10 Hawkins a year to about 50 Lehmans a year,
Hmm.
give or take.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is it's kind of small once you get out there, but I want to say Fort Laramie was 6 Hawkins a year to
Uh,
50 or 60 Lehmans a year, and that was just and that isn't even close to the amount of Northwest trade guns that went through those places.
yeah. Uh,
Lehman turned out Northwest trade guns.
Well, like just real quick before, again, it just comes down to the price thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can have the best whatever, like now people nowadays, you can have the newest iPhone, 1300 bucks,
Mm-hmm.
or you can buy the $50 phone at Walmart because it works. So to me it kind of just falls into that category of you bought it because you want it, like like okay, like imagine this: you're going out west, you're heading out of St. Louis, you're talking to mountain men, wannabe mountain men, you know, people who are you know telling you truthful things, or people who are just joshing you around. But you keep hearing the word Hawken, Hawken this, Hawken that. Oh, Hawken shops down the street, down this part of town. But okay, I have a gun. It's 45 caliber, 50 caliber, or the bore size. I don't know how to say that. I'm not. Then you go out. You're going from St. Louis down to Santa Fe, and along the way there, you're you know you kind of realize, hey, kind of underarmed, or man, I wish I had that Hawken rifle they kept boasting about in St. Louis.
Yep.
That true mountain man, true free, frontiersman's gun. Because I bought the Bowie knife because they said you need a Bowie knife to go come out this way. So I bought the Bowie knife, but I don't got my Hawken. Well, I get to Ben's Fort. Oh, hey, they got a Hawken. I don't buy a
Yeah.
Hawken. So
I think that might be one of the reasons Bent's Fort sold more than Fort Laramie, as Bent's Fort was merchant,
yeah,
richer men, whereas Fort Laramie is just families going west for the most part.
yeah.
Turkey Creek said the next three builds I have planned after Garrett's Flint Hawken. How man, you spoiled it. Yeah, I got Turkey Creek. We're working on. I got this stock that was given to me years ago. I've been trying to plan what to do with it, and I finally just decided I can't do it, so I'm going to give it to a master builder and let him build it. And so he's going to do that. But he said after he gets done with that, he's going to build a full stock Lehman, an English pattern J.J. Henry, and another 1803 Harper's Ferry.
I'm gonna have to talk with him about the JJ Henry.
Oh, I thought you wanted a Lehman.
But
uh,
no one makes the JJ Henry.
yeah. Did Lehman? Do you remember what the story is on Lehman flintlocks?
I
Were
mean,
they ever even made?
they were made.
Yeah.
There were some of the earlier ones, and they were unsteady until about the '60s.
Cool. That's cool.
And and one thing I
You don't
wanted,
have the big debate that we have to deal with.
no one thought about talking about the average man. No, they want they want the super story of the Hawken. Well, one thing I will add is that the India made trade gun
Mhm.
might actually be on par with a Lehman trade gun because from what I read or understand, the Lehman trade guns were always bigger bored, 60 to 70 caliber, and they were
Mhm.
thicker,
Yep.
especially by the 1860s. They're usually thicker. So,
And they didn't even like them because they were thicker
yeah,
either, though. Okay. Uh, Grumpy Alaska said that the Zouaves get released in time to make it very few, if any. I mean, very few. Massive amounts of those got sold off, and the majority of them got sold off to Bannerman in 1900 with the Roger Spencers, like you say. But I'm not saying none of them did because I've learned to never talk in absolutes.
yeah.
I have some beautiful. Joshua Harris said I have seen some beautifully made Lehman rifles at shows. Not beautiful in flashy terms, but functionality. Yeah, they're not real flashy. One thing they got over Hawkins is Hawkins weren't known, especially early on, for having any curl. And Lehman's have the best tiger stripe maple curl you've ever seen.
Oh yeah, you think that they're just growing in the backyard and selecting the best.
It's always been funny. At least when Hawkins did make a maple curly tiger maple stock, the maple didn't rub off. The stripe didn't rub off.
Yeah, well, when Lehman made their nice presentations, they used actual maple.
Oh,
That
well,
would be on par with the Hagen.
yeah, be par on par with the standard Hawking.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, so we know that. Do we know where Cody got his? Not Cody Carson. Sorry, senior moment. It's funny you should mention that because Samuel Hawken claimed in 1882 that not only did he sell his to Carson, which Carson got a couple of them, but he did sell one supposedly to Buffalo Bill. Now I find that an interesting story because when Buffalo Bill was still using a muzzleloader, he was a no-name Army scout on some lowly fort in Kansas, sleeping on the ground by the graveyard. Sheldon knows where that was. And he was using a muzzleloader then, but I don't think he could have afforded a Hawken. And it was in 1868, he walked in the door at Fort Larned into the quartermaster's shop, and he did not even have a gun, period. They gave him a 1866 Springfield trapdoor that he carried for basically the rest of his life as his buffalo rifle. So I find that unless he just bought one to say he bought one later on, then maybe. Kit Carson, on the other hand, is another story. He was in St. Louis. They had no Hawkins in the shop. They were sold out. He tells them, make me a Hawken. He gives them specifications, everything. Tells Jake this. Doesn't come back for like 8 years after Jake's dead. Walks in and says, is my Hawken ready? And Sam's like, who are you? He said, oh, I ordered a Hawken. He said, the only Hawken I have in stock is one I built for Kit Carson like 8 years ago. And he said, I'm Kit Carson. And he walked away with that Hawken. And that was the gun he used till the day he died. And he donated it to a museum, I believe, in Santa Fe. But yeah, that's the story of Kit Carson's Hawken. He was like on order for like 8 years and never came back and got it. And they held it for him that amount of time.
see, a Hawken's so special that the famous mountain man just forgot about it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you forgot about it. Just turns out it's a long way from Taos to St. Louis.
Oh, it's not like the Bent brothers are making that trip at least
Yeah.
twice a year.
Yeah, just tell him to bring it. Maybe he didn't have the money. That would be my, because he ordered a pretty special gun. I imagine it was pretty expensive. Turkey Creek. Okay, not Cody Hawken. Grumpy Alaska said, were there Franken guns, Western Ranchers, etc.? I know never threw anything out. Seems that pieced together ought to exist. Definitely,
The
definitely on the
mhm.
Lehman guns for sure. And you could call Mariano Medina's a Franken gun because it had Hansen laughed at people in the 1970s when they told him it was an 1833 gun. He said, "Can't be. The barrel's off of an 1855. The lock doesn't invent it until 1837." And it wasn't until years later Bob Woodfill found the records where he went to Denver and met Sam Hawken and had him replace the barrel and the lock on it and fix the. But yeah, that was a Franken gun, and I'm sure.
Like for Grumpy Alaska, some of my favorites are the piece together native guns that they made work. Think think there was a picture of one on Google, but yeah, it's like it was. They had the original like breech area with the lock and the barrel, but the stock was like wrapped up with some rawhide and laced on. If Green Rifle Barrel Company still made Lehman's, I'd buy one because as Garrett has found out today, I can't inlet a butt plate for the life of me. So
You just haven't worked at it enough. You got it.
I am losing too much wood.
Rome wasn't built in a day. So who cares if you got an 11-inch length of pole when you're done? You'll get it. You'll get it.
Yeah, I'll be a
I think
pistol by the time I'm
you
done.
let the top out a little too much, and then you let the bottom out a little too much, and then you have to let the top back out a little too much.
That's basically what's been going on. I'm gonna have a pistol by the time I'm done.
Oh, okay. So he said, I want an 1803 with a trade gun, smoothbore, and a hook breech. Revere 0311, the channel actually has an original one of those. He thought it was shot out, but I think it's a trade gun smoothbore. In 1896, Shepard said, didn't the other Hawken brothers stay behind and kept making long rifles? Yeah, Christian Hawken, George Hawken, there was a bunch of Hawkins, like 4 or 5 of them. Christian was the dad. Um, the son, William Hawkins, Sam's son, made a bunch of WMS Hawkins. But what people consider the Hawken Plains rifle is made by Jake and Sam in St. Louis, possibly after 1825 to 1830 in Flintlocks, but definitely from 1830 to 1849. Now, after 1849, they're still Sam Hawkins, and they're a whole kind of different animal. They're almost all completely factory built, brought in, and he puts them together. And then after 1860, when he sells it in 1862, basically to Gimmer, they're still using the Hawken name, but what people consider, I would say, the true Hawkins is 1830 to 1849. That's the J&S Hawkins. And then the whole other S Hawken variety from in the 1850s. Doug Duke said Green River Barrel Company made Lehman's. I picked up a 54 caliber full stock last show. Who made your Lehman?
It was a track of the Wolf kit, but I don't think it was supposed to be a Lehman.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think it was supposed to be their what's his name, Jim Bridger Hawking, because a lot of the stuff on there kind of matched that.
I bet it was. Turkey Creek said that's Green River Rifle Works in Utah. Yeah. Grumpy Alaska said they cut it off 3 times and it's still too short. Oh. Turkey Creek said Ron Paul was one of the gunsmith there. He later made J.J. Henry trade rifles. Is it true that heavy plains rifles barrels, even Hawkins, got repurposed as bull bars in the goldfields? Oh, Sheldon thinks so. I don't. I'm with Woodfill on it. When that story took place, supposedly, was it Peg Leg Smith? I can't remember who it was, maybe. Went to the goldfields in 1850, got a Sharps rifle, one of the early Sharps rifles, traded. Okay, this is the thing. Traded his Hawken for a Sharps. And then in the story, uses a Hawken barrel for a crowbar. Now, how does that even work? He traded it for the Sharps.
He traded lead.
Okay, Woodfill says he wasn't even there at the time the story was told, and I believe that. And he says it's written for sensation, and I believe that too, because if you bought that gun in 1850 in St. Louis for $25, doesn't matter if it's a Hawk, a muzzle loader, or a Sharps or what. In California, it's going to be worth $50. Why in the world would you pull apart a $50 gun and use the barrel for a crowbar? You could buy 50 crowbars.
With how
So,
California was, how California was at that time, you probably would have been able to buy five.
maybe. But I'm with Woodfill on that. That story just makes no sense. But yes, it is a documented story. Was Peg Leg, whatever his name, there in 1850? I don't know. I just find it very hard to believe that they would take those expensive Hawken barrels that were so famous, especially in California, for Kit Carson and Fremont bringing them in. I mean, you could have got a lot of money. Why in the world would you take and use it for a crowbar? I don't know. Maybe I'm all wrong.
Well,
What's
I
your thought?
mean, my thing is when was the Sharps rifle or Sharps carbine available?
49, I believe.
49. Paying $25 in California? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I'm not too well versed in the Sharps. I know there's a 52 and the 58 or something like that with a slant breech and whatnot.
The first one came out September. It's patented on September 12th of 1848. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. And if the only way I could think that he traded a Hawken for a Sharps was either one that was a very desperate man that just wanted a gun that he knew, a gun that he recognized, which is just would have been a muzzleloader, and he just wanted to offload the Sharps because it was too much of a bear on him.
Yeah.
Or
He also said the
he
Sharps
traded
had
lead.
the worst trigger that pull that he'd ever had, and he had to send it to a gunsmith to have the trigger fixed.
It could have been. I mean, when you're especially when you're new on the block, probably won't be the best.
Yeah.
Or got damaged, and a different gunsmith tried to
Mm-hmm.
fix it and made it worse.
Well, let's see. Well, considering eggs were worth $25, Grumpy Alaska said, "Have either of you been in remote boom towns? I lived through the Alaska pipeline boom and later the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Well, technically, my town was a boom town once on ship, and now it doesn't exist anymore. so, um, well, consider okay. Gotta go, boys. Good night, y'all. Cool Hand 209 said, "Well, thanks for watching.
Good night.
We're an hour and 30 minutes into this, and we've had quite the discussion. I don't know that we've gone anywhere, but it's been a discussion."
We've been going in circles. Technically, it's going somewhere.
Uh, I read that in the Civil War. Now this is on a Facebook deal, so it's iffy. Plains rifles disappeared during the Civil War because the military guns became so prevalent right after the Civil War, which could load mini balls. And I don't buy that at all
No,
because the Lehmans kept on selling.
the Lehmans kept on selling, and then there was the orders to Red Cloud Agency, Spotted Tail Agency, and they were typically for a Lehmans, and usually about like 250 to 300.
Hmm. And that carries on all the way to the 1880s. They just keep selling them.
I mean, they keep selling them, and like I said, you had little back Garniers, uh, little back Garniers trade gun or plains rifle. That was 62 caliber, and it says Henry Folsom.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, and he was using that probably up into the 1880s.
Yeah.
Because if you're, I mean, it was his rifle. He knew how to load it, how to use it, and how to get the game and stuff. And then by the time the Buffalo were gone, I don't think he needed a big 62 caliber.
Hmm. Um, I would say I found it interesting in that Ned Roberts book on the Caplock rifles. He talked about how his uncle, who was a Berdan sharpshooter and a massive sharpshooter, did not make the American team for the first Creedmoor matches.
Hmm.
But he went to it, and he took him with him. And they were shooting against the Irish, and the Irish were shooting breechload cartridge guns. And his uncle told him, "No way they'll beat us," because he said they haven't they don't know what's in those cartridges. He's like, they didn't load those bullets themselves. They're this and that, and then they beat us. And the next year, everybody on the American teams had sharps, but Ned Roberts' uncle informed him it was because the Americans hadn't taken the time to judge the wind, with their muzzle loaders. If they had judged the wind, we'd still be shooting muzzle loaders today.
Who knows? The Irish were probably hand loading their stuff.
I imagine they were, but I thought that was pretty funny
Yeah.
because that was later on. That just was the attitude people had. I think people legitimately thought that the muzzle loader could still be shot more accurately because people go into the store buying new cartridges off the shelf and people weren't really knowing how to make them yet.
Yeah.
The stories of the jamming, the stories of take for instance the Henry in the 66 not having the bottleneck, how they could foul back and jam, fouling coming backwards. I would think that would play into some people's mind.
Like, just real quick with the Henry and the 44 rimfire, especially the early ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were that way until they stopped making them. They're copper cased, and that copper was soft enough to where you shot it expanded to prevent that blow by.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if you talk to like people who shot sharps, like the modern guys who shoot, who shoot the original bottlenecks or
Mm-hmm.
the modern interpretations of the bottlenecks foul.
Really?
Yeah, the bottlenecks foul up more so than the straight wall. So apparently that was a known discussion between the Buffalo runners back then, and Mike Venturino's book. I have it back there somewhere. He talks about that.
You learn
And
something new every day.
so yeah, it was like saying the bottlenecks were more of the fouling. Like they would foul so much around where the neck was in the chamber that you couldn't put another cartridge in because they fouled.
Huh. Well, I learned something new here today. I'm going to take that. Going to take that pistol out of my holster. Okay, I believe they were shooting the Peabody. The famous Custer trapdoor case separation story.
All loops back to Little Bighorn.
We're not going into that story today. If we start talking about that, I'll talk about it for an hour.
But I will say this, since we rounded to Little Bighorn one way or another.
Yeah.
There was 94 Lehmans that were surrendered, but there was like 4 to 6 Hawkins surrendered.
2 Hawkins.
Was it 2 Hawkins?
Well, later on, yeah, 2 Hawkins, I believe, was the number. No, I wasn't correcting you. You're probably right, but I was ahead. I was thinking ahead when you said 94. I was like, yeah, we got 2.
Oh, I know there was another maker in there, and that might have been the 4 or 6.
Ballard. Well,
No.
those are. Well, I mean, there was a lot of repeaters too, but.
Well, we're just talking muzzle loaders.
I can actually tell you that right quick. I think. Right here.
Hey, you got the book. Like, you can say, one of the Hawkins.
Go ahead.
So you can say, though, if you read a Little Bighorn, you're gonna run into a couple white bulls, but the white bull I'm gonna talk about is he's a Lakota, he's an Ogallala, and he talks about when he was with the Cheyennes, this one named Roan Bear took a shot at the charging when they're coming off the Medicine Tail Coulee, and he ducked behind a tree to reload his muzzleloader. You can just imagine it can be your head cannon. He had the Hawken and he missed the legendary shot that could have got Custer.
Okay. Let's see. I know they're in here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but... Springfield. Man, they had a lot of trapdoors. Captured in 1877. Winchester, Spencer, miscellaneous. Warner, Joslin, Frank Wesson, Remington, Gallagher, Merrill. Octagon percussion locks. Okay. Lehman. Okay, that whole page is Lehman. Lehman. That whole page is Lehman. Oh, Lower. JP Lower had 3. JP Lower had a bunch. Oh, you're right. Okay. Hawkins. And a bunch of J. Henrys. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Hawkins. 1 in 58, 1 in 54, 2 in 42, 1 in 46, and 1 in 52. And All but one of them, their locks worked.
Huh. You say one was
All
40?
worked. Yes. What stock condition was worn, broken, worn, fair. That's pretty good for those ones that they turned in, really.
What was the calibers again?
50, 158, and it's at, okay, the 158 one is a J and S Hawken. So
Oh,
that's an
okay.
earlier. The rest of them are all the more common Sam S Hawkins from the 1850s. The 58 caliber one, and then there's 154, 242s, 146, and 152.
Oh, okay.
That's the 352s, 154, and 146, and
So the
152.
Hawkins weren't making planes rifles all the time. They were sub
No,
50.
they
I
made a
was
lot of
fooling
what
you
they
early.
called squirrel rifles for
Yeah.
local trade. A lot of 38 calibers. I don't think they went much smaller than that, but a lot of 45s, 47s, 49s.
I was pulling your leg.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, I think it was. I've read it, but I haven't found the reference for it or the order. But they were, it was stated that they started trading 45 and under calibers to the tribes because they wouldn't be used for warfare, strictly hunting.
That is interesting, though. That I always laugh when I look at those pages because it's like everybody thinks they're going to be turning in all these Winchesters, right? Because that's what. And I'm like, hey, take a look at this. Whole page of Lehman's, 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 a bunch of Springfields, few
Only dropped
Winchesters,
once.
like you turn in like 8 or 10 Winchesters. The vast majority of them are Lehman's. Of
You
course,
know,
Duke would say they kept the good one under the floor and turned the bad one in, so I don't know.
well, that's what Black Elk said in his book when his family surrendered at Fort Robinson. Him and his uncle, the way he said was him and his uncle, they buried their good guns and then surrendered the crap ones. But never really. But I think he said the cartridge. But when he meant like one thing I've noticed when they mention good guns, they always meant the breech loaders.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the 4082. I would assume that's in a 76 style rifle or an 86 style rifle. Bottlenecked extremely tight. One of those like a 44 or like a 4070. Most of the only thing I've ever read about guns like that are a few hunting trips in the early 1900s. But I don't have any. I don't know if Sheldon has any or has any knowledge on Winchester 4082.
Not really. The only 40 I know is like the Sharps ones, the 4050, 4070.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar. It kind of lands after my time for the most part. I tell people a lot. My timing really ends in '73. After that, my interest in guns starts fading off.
Mine kind of peters off about 76, then about 80. Gone.
Long taper 4590, no bottleneck. Cool. Before the cartridges, 1896 Shepard said, before the cartridges came in, and after I think the match shooters use stuff like Rigby Gibbs and shoots in style rigs or picket rigs. Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because that's a whole story for another day. Is Eastern target rifles? I actually have a Burns rifle right over here that's in 32 caliber, but it's a 16-pound rifle, and I couldn't get it to shoot round ball well, and I never could figure it out until I started reading Ned Roberts' book on the cap lock rifle and how they were shooting conicals, and all the way back in the 1840s, guns were being made for conicals. So I ran a patch and a rod down there, and I started measuring, and that thing has a 1 in 40 twist. I honestly believe that Burns rifle back there, that big 16-pound 32 caliber rifle, is made for a long 32 caliber conical for long range shooting. Because even with the round balls, it was sighted in at over 100 yards, and I was like, man, that's a mean squirrel rifle right there. So I think that might be a target rifle, and I might have to try some conicals if I can figure out how to do it.
I mean, I think if you go onto eBay and type in like Prickett ball mold, you might be able to find one.
Yeah, or just do like he was doing and modify a Colt pocket model mold.
At this point, probably be easier to modify one Aragon bullet molds.
Probably. Okay. Turkey Creek said, I'm thinking 4082 was a high wall cartridge.
Could have been.
Okay, we're gonna go through a couple more of these guys. We're gonna run for about 15 more minutes, and then we're gonna shut it down. We still kind of got to get toward the end of the story.
I
But
lost where we were.
he said Grumpy Alaska said was an 86 cartridge and express rifle. Uh, Turkey Creek said I'm thinking 4082 was a high wall cartridge. I wish I could show you the 1873 I have. It's a target rifle, but it looks like a plains rifle. Same deal. 1896 Shepard said I have a 40 caliber original picket rig from the mid 1800s. Gain twist rifling, also won't shoot ball. I'm wondering if that's what, because when I got this book, I posted on Facebook that I'm stepping into this new world of target cap lock rifles, which is what I meant was target rifles like that. You wouldn't believe the amount of old men who started telling me, get your Thompson Center to start out with, and then you go from there, maybe move on. One guy told me, you'll really like a few of those Civil War muskets if you ever shoot them. And then he said, after that, you might try trapdoors. I just smiled and went on. And I was like, that was what I was talking about. Probably shot more Thompson Center Hawkins than he's ever seen. But I thought that was funny. He started off with the I'm older than you, so let me guide you down this path. And I was like, okay. How many fast twist 16-pound target cap lock rifles do you have? But, you know, that did bug me a little bit. I was like, man, Facebook world is so different than YouTube.
It is. What you should do is, I think it's Grimcrack bullet molds. He sells, pre-made bullets from the Aragon molds.
Mm-hmm.
Just buy yourself a couple of the pocket conicals and try them out on your rifle.
I actually have out in the garage what they call a bag style mold.
Oh, okay.
That is a 30 caliber long bullet. I always assumed it was for like a 94 Winchester or something, but I didn't know if they were still using bag style molds then. So I don't know what it's for. I'll have to look into it. But yeah, you're right. Some Sugarloaf Pickett style bullet or Sugarloaf bullet. It really piqued my interest in trying this gun out because it would shoot round balls, but you would think this big, and it has a good bore, you would think this big 16-pound 42-inch target rifle and 32 caliber would shoot a better group at 50 yards than that. And I think it's because it's such a fast rifling twist that they're stripping and they need a conical.
Like just before, once we find where we're supposed to be with the plains rifles and stuff, because we're somewhere. We got lost on the plains.
Lost on the plains.
I was actually looking up these Pickett Sugarloaf style bullets because that muzzle loading bag I made, the one that was a copy of one of the ones I got surrendered in 1880, it came with bullets inside the bag, and some of them, were conicals, and they didn't look like Colt or any kind of Colt bullet mold.
Yeah,
bullet, I should say.
When do you think the plains rifle died?
1870. I think that's when
the rolling block and the trapdoor put it out.
I think by 1870 it fell out of favor because of the cartridge guns, and then it was still lingering. But officially, I think the nail in the coffin was the mid 1880s.
Yeah,
because by mid 1880s, the West was settled. You had cheap 22s already out, single shot 22s. So that's what you weren't hunting buffalo because they're practically all gone. All the buffalo runners were using their sharps and rolling blocks and what have you. So I say mid 1880s was the official nail in the coffin.
I think you're right. In some places, if you go into Canada, I think she hangs on a long time.
The Northwest trade gun hung on until the 1920s.
Yeah, I never hear about the trade rifle hanging on that long.
I think it's
not popular.
I don't think it's as popular in Canada just because the ones that were still using flintlocks were mainly the tribes and trappers, and they could make their flints real easy. And Northwest trade guns are way more versatile than a trade rifle. or a plains rifle because you can, as you can load with ball, you can load with shot, load as heavy as you want, download it as much as you can want. So that's why I think the Northwest trade gun just stayed a lot longer than the plains rifle in general.
Yeah. One thing I will say on the Hawkins side, Gimmer bought the shop in '62.
Yeah.
The last time he recorded still having Gimmer muzzleloading Hawkins for sale was in 1894.
Hmm.
It was not popular by then, but it's funny because he held the shop until 1915.
Hmm.
And then it went into storage, all the equipment. And in 1961 or 58 or 61, I can't remember, a man named Art Russell bought all of it. It wasn't in the same building anymore, it was in storage. The building was long gone. But he still, all that equipment became the Hawkins shop that we know today.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, the Plains rifle, as far as the Hawkins side, was only out of business from about 1915 to about 1960. Then the equipment went back, and now they've replaced a lot of it. Now a lot of it's museum quality pieces, but the Hawkins shop is still making the kits that are very close, and it's owned by a different fella now. But I find that very interesting. It's kind of like the Southern Mountain Rifle and the Northwest Trade Gun. By the time these guns got completely out of service and quit making them, people started getting nostalgia for them and making them replicas within about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they never really went away, did they?
Not really.
Not. It's weird to think, but a lot of guns do. Like your military guns, those went away. Your like your Springfield trapdoors, those went away. Your Springfield muzzleloaders, your Enfields, those all went away. But civilian guns never die.
That's because civilian guns are more. Civilian population is a lot bigger in the military.
And nostalgia is a powerful drug.
Oh yeah, it's like your cap block rifle book. He said he was writing that in the 30s.
Yep. Still shooting cap blocks. It is interesting. It says I have nostalgia for a flintlock full stock flintlock Hawken, and I never even had one.
I have a nostalgia to shoot a cap lock gun in all mine besides the CVA are out of commission.
You'll get there. You'll get there.
Good
thing to practice on that Great Plains rifle.
I'm about to get the aqua glass, filling it in.
Yep. All right, we're gonna wind her down here. We got a couple more. Let's see. Yeah, Doug Duke said 4082 was also a Winchester 86 cartridge. I have a hand reloading tool for that. Let's see. Turkey Creek said, yeah, the 86. Doug Duke said, original Walker conical mold that came for the pistol was a picket bullet. Yeah. No. And that's what I've seen. A lot of the 1840s pictures of the Hawkins people, even in the mountains, using what they call the inch-long sugar loaf, but I don't think it's actually a sugar loaf because it has no heel. I think it's a picket. Grumpy Alaska said the northern tribes don't have as much of a history with bows and a lot of history with spears. Getting close with a versatile smoothbore was not unfamiliar. In Alaska, at least, marine mammals from a boat is also very close. Smoothbores are easier to feed and make a lot of sense. I agree. I'm actually kind of not like most other people who like this history. I prefer a smoothbore, honestly. But that's just me.
It's like when, just to go on the smoothbore versus rifle thing, whenever, in the historic stuff, when they mention Americans, they also mention American, and an American in their rifle.
Mm-hmm.
You got the French Canadians with their smoothbore. You got the Americans with their rifles, and you got the Spanish with their either brown bess or as we mentioned with those Mexican buffalo hunters, they use bow and arrows too. So
I actually read about that in Hanson's book.
Mm-hmm.
Mariano Medina actually got into a scrap with a bunch of Mexicans that were shooting bows, and I think that's what the people you're talking about in about 1839 or so.
Yeah, those Ceboleros.
It starts with a C. I knew that much. I actually might have the account here before we cut it off right quick. It's in the chapter on who used other Mountain Man rifles. Let me look one more quick look here. Observations on gun characteristics. This book was just written purely out of hate. It's like me with walkers. It's kind of sad.
Oh, when you get your Walker book, no
I have a
one,
couple of them.
no, when you get the personally written by Garrett Woods.
Oh yeah. Let's see, James Verdine, Peg Leg Smith, Old Bill was the name of the Big Hawken. I like Captain James T. Kirker, who was a man of enterprise. He carried a Hawken. Okay, here we go. I don't remember if it was Juan Medina. It might have been one of his brothers. Said after the Mexican-American War, increasing numbers of New Mexicans settled in Colorado, and many of them were very proficient with American rifles. In later years, Pedro Sandoval described the arms of some of the casualties during the Ute attack on Pablo, Colorado in 1854. Or is this the one? Yeah. Bento Sandoval, Romeldo, Cordova, Joaquin, Pancho, all had rifles. Juan Socho, whatever, had a fusil, and Juan Medina had a bow and arrows. Let's see. That wasn't the one I was thinking about. There's another story in here about Mariano Medino shooting a guy who had a bow through the door of a adobe house. Okay. Frank Gerard, the favorite scout of General Crook, said that Sitting Bull gave him a muzzleloading Hawken in 1871. You ever heard that one?
Yeah, it's in his book
Yeah.
because he says he had a worn out smoothbore that they gave him a worn out smoothbore after they trusted him, which he used to shoot like a deer at some sort of distance.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly Sitting Bull was so impressed that he gave him that Hawken.
Yeah.
I think in the book he just describes it as a muzzle loading rifle.
Yeah.
Or a rifle, not a musket. Fuzzy.
A Fisel.
I ain't French.
All right, 2 minutes, and let's see. We got a couple people in here. He said,
Turkey Creek still here?
"Oh, is he? No, yeah, he's still here. He hasn't said bye yet."
Oh.
Doug Duke said, "Okay." Grumpy Alaska said the North. Okay, yeah, we got through that. Okay, Grumpy Alaska said, "I get one moose a year. I get most with bunnies. I get most of the year with bunnies and birds. Smoothbore gets a lot more use." Soylent Green, hi, he said, even during the Civil War, the 69th New York Brigade refused to give up their smoothbore 69 1842 Springfields that had to be forced to take 1861 and 1863 as they became available. They loved the buck and ball option. I was late, so hi and goodbye. Well, we're glad you showed up. So you got any final thoughts on why the Hawken is better than the Lehman?
Why the Lehman was better?
I mean, why the Hawken was better than the Lehman?
Why the Lehman was better than the Hawken?
Well, I mean, if you want to own, the Honda Civic, and some of us have got the F-350.
Yeah, but with the Honda Civic, you can go a lot faster than the F-350.
So it doesn't matter. We're pulling a whole lot more TKO, man.
A couple a couple of teriyaki terror twins. That little Honda will push 1,000 horsepower.
Turkey Creek's still here. You got something to ask Turkey Creek?
Nah, it's gonna be about that butt plate. Even though everything I've read says the same thing.
I can put you in contact with him.
Yeah.
We'll talk afterwards. If he's willing to give you some advice. Sheldon's having a hard time with woodworking on butt plate right now.
I'm running out of wood.
His length of pole's getting shorter and shorter.
I'm happy I'm not 6'2" because I think it would be right up.
All right, we hit 2 hours. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was a little rambly. We are in the future going to be changing the format a little bit to where we're going to release an actual audio podcast a day or maybe the same day before the live chat. That way we get all the points out into a consecutive,
Cohesive.
more tightly bound section. And then we will come on and do a live chat afterwards and we can talk about it. I think we're going to try to do it that way.
And then sometime next year, I'm going to say next year, Gary and I are going to have a competition, the Hawken versus Lehman.
Well, it'd probably be pretty easy when you're shooting it from the hip because you don't got a stock left.
I'll have my new Lehman I'm building.
Oh, yep. Well, once we get the good Hawken rebuilt. Right now, you and me are both rebuilding Great Plains rifles, so.
And no, Grumpy, we're not saying you guys derailed things. We derailed ourselves.
No, never. It's just so we can spend more time talking to you guys instead of more time trying to remember where we're at.
Right. I said we got lost on the plains.
Anyway. All right. Well, guys, thank you for watching. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We may still do it this way in 2 weeks. We may set up for the new format by then. Depends on if I get to spend the $80 StreamYard wants me to spend to record. Anyway, all right. We'll see you all later. Bye.
Thanks for your advice, Turkey Creek.